Welcome to the Keeping It Israel podcast with Jeff Futers, where Jeff and his guests talk everything Israel as it relates to Christian faith and the church. If you are a Christian and you stand with Israel, you will be encouraged and challenged by this podcast. And if you're not so sure about the whole Israel thing, you need to learn how your faith connects with Israel and why standing with Israel matters. Now here's Jeff with today's guest.
Well, welcome to the podcast, and my name is Jeff. I'll be your host today. I'm the Executive Director of First Century Foundations, and we're doing something fun today. I'll be interviewing some good friends of mine, Chris Atkins from One Media, and Laura Delegarde, who is the producer of our upcoming Miraculous Victories of Israel documentary series. And we're going to be talking about the series, talking about some of the making of and the travel that we did together. I know you're going to want to listen to this, so I don't want to waste any time. Let's get right to that interview today. We're now streaming on Facebook, so we want to welcome everybody who's joining us live. My name is Jeff. I'm from First Century Foundations, and with me today are Chris Atkins from One Media Productions. Yeah, Chris, you should wave because they wouldn't know that was you. And then Laura Delegarde. And Laura is the writer-producer of Miraculous Victories of Israel that we have been working on and getting ready to release to the public. Chris, of course, is our director and prolific videographer / editor and many, many other things. So, hey, welcome, guys. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit today, and this will be not just this Facebook Live event, but it'll be also a podcast that we're going to put up on the Keeping It Israel podcast. And so just want to make sure that everybody knows that they'll be able to find it on those mediums. But we're going to talk about this process. And I guess, first of all, let's talk about how you guys know each other, because, in a very interesting series of events, you kind of came to me with this idea. But Chris, you and I were already working together, but you'd known Laura for many, many years. As a matter of fact, more than known, you're related, kind of.
Kind of, almost sort of related. Yeah, so my brother is married to Laura's sister, and Laura and my wife Danielle were best friends through school, and so we went to church together, and I've known her whole family for a very long time. And so yeah, it's through high school and through our youth group days, that kind of stuff. We knew each other, and then I kind of lost track. Laura just kind of disappeared, and then in 2006, my wife Danielle and I were in Jerusalem, and we heard somebody screaming our names.
I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen Chris since it's been a long time.
Yeah,
he used to be in my band, actually.
Yes, I forgot.
Wow,
about that. We used to Laura's band. Yeah.
So in a very real sense, the band is back together.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Wow.
When we ran into you in Jerusalem, or I ran into you, I could not believe it. I just thought, I haven't seen them in so long, and of all the places to just bang. And we thought it was really a divine, actually, kind of meant to be connection at that point.
Yeah, it was very cool. And then after that, it just seemed like we kept running into each other more and more. And then work opportunities opened up. Laura was studying at Hebrew University when I went over there to do another project. And we were very, very overwhelmed with that project. And so I reached out and I said, "Hey, I know you're in school right now. Would you have some time to kind of help us out with this?" And it worked out quite well. And so we've been working together on pretty much all things Israel for a long time now.
Yeah, it seems like every job that we've had together has taken us to Israel or been focused on Israel materials. So it's interesting.
Well, as you know, Israel is something that's close to my heart, and that's kind of how we all got connected. I mean, when I came to First Century Foundations 4 years ago. I can hardly believe that it's been 4 years already. It'll be 4 years in September, I think. And, when I first came, there was a TV show that was in place, First Century Foundations. And by the way, if you're listening, watching, check out First Century Foundations, the television show. We're on Vision TV and Daystar Canada. I think we're on Vision on Tuesdays and Daystar on Thursdays. Tuesdays at 1 p.m., Thursdays at 1:30 for now. I think that's going to change in the not too distant future, but check it out. Or go to our YouTube channel. You can just search First Century Foundations on YouTube and see the show there. But, the show had been in place for a number of years. You had worked with my predecessor, Chris.
Yeah.
And so when I contacted you to say, hey, what should we do with this TV show thing? You told me you were going to make me a star, and I want to say I'm a little disappointed still.
I didn't say how,
hey,
I didn't say how long it would take.
That's true. That is true. So we're still waiting, but anyway, it's been fun. It's been fun working together. At least I think it's been fun. I shouldn't speak for you, but we have spent a fair bit of time together in Israel. And if you're like me, you're missing Israel right now. This has been a bad year.
Oh my goodness, I'm missing Israel so much. I mean, having studied there for 7 months and then been there back and forth with Chris so often, and then with you, it's really sad to think that we may not be there for a little while.
Yeah, and actually, I'm quite angry at the two of you because while I'm working on editing this project, I'm having to look at all these amazing shots and remembering all of our times in Israel and all the restaurants that we ate at. And it's not only can I not get there, but I have to look at these images and feel almost homesick for Israel every day. And
yes. Well, I would apologize, except that, we're paying you. So
that's true.
Yeah, you just suck it up. You'll be fine. We're missing Israel too. I agree with both of you. This has been just a very strange year, and I don't know when we might get back there again. But anyhow, let's not get too far off into COVID territory. Everybody knows this is happening. It's a global pandemic. We don't have to tell people anymore. But we want to talk about this project, Miraculous Victories of Israel. And Chris, you and I traveled, I think, back in March last year, February, March. We went to film for the TV show. And while we were there, you sort of casually mentioned, and you'd maybe mentioned it once before, this idea that, your friend Laura had. I had never met Laura, didn't know anything about her, thought it was kind of sketchy that you were pushing her. But at the same time, this idea intrigued me. So, Laura, you had come up with a concept. You've done some of this kind of thing before, but talk about the vision for this series and sort of how we got here.
Well, it's been a long journey getting here for me, my side of the story. I first kind of got a revelation, I don't know if you want to say, or just it was quite a heart change for me. In about 1999, I think it was, when I first got it, hearing a sermon about Ruth in the Bible, clinging to Naomi rather than leaving her. Long story short, it just talked about how as people who are not Jewish, but are Gentiles who believe in the God of Israel, that we have a role to play in, holding on to Israel and to that important heritage that we're grafted into. And after that, I actually went to Israel for my first trip. It was like months after. My aunt had gone and said, go, go, go. And it was just a tour. And I was just struck. I just knew I was going to be back. And the Bible just started to come to life and actually make a lot more sense to me. And eventually I ended up in university studying religious studies as my major and my master, and just love learning Hebrew and just the passion for Israel grew inside of me. So really, this documentary series just comes out of that passion.
That's fantastic. And so the idea about, miraculous victories. I mean, I've read the Old Testament for many, many years now, gone through those stories, and we heard them in Sunday school as kids. What brought you to this sense of sort of pulling some of these together and really chronicling and documenting is what we're doing? The fact that these happened, and we can know that these happen with a certain amount of certainty. What got you there?
I actually learned about the modern wars of Israel. So 1967, I learned about how, and even the war of 1948, Israel's independence war. Just reading about how the Jewish people, having just survived a Holocaust barely, being attacked all around, just managed to survive. And in my mind, reading about some of the battles and just stepping back and looking at the picture, it just reminded me of a biblical battle. And it just made me wonder, I had heard in Sunday school about Jericho and the walls coming down, and David and Goliath, and all these miraculous stories. And I just thought, I wonder if, God still does those things for Israel today, because it seems as though they've survived against all odds.
Yeah.
And it just got my wheels turning, and I started diving into the Bible, diving into history, and I thought it was worthy of a series, just to take people from some of them through the Bible, through some of the most amazing victories, right to the modern times, and just to see God's hand of faithfulness on the nation Israel.
Fantastic. Well, we Chris and I talked back in March 2019. Yeah, that was a year ago. And he said, "What do you think? Do you want to sort of investigate this?" And he introduced you and I by email, and then we started to sort of chat a little bit back and forth. You sent me a kind of a rough draft of what these episodes would look like, and this has sort of morphed over time. But I'm so excited that we are getting so close to being able to get this product out to people. I think that people are going to be interested in having this for their collection. I think it's going to be educational for them. It's going to be informational for them, but also it's going to transport them to a place that maybe a lot of people will never be able to go. And that's what we try and do with the television show. But also this series, it really speaks to the heart of God's faithfulness to Israel, but in turn his faithfulness to all of us, right? I mean, that's kind of what we saw and discussed over and over again, even as we were filming and talking to some of the experts. So we're gonna just get into talking about what it's all about for now. So Laura or Chris, either one, tell us a little bit about some of the victories that we're going to cover and how all of that has been coming together. Let's just talk about that a little bit.
Did you want to start with maybe the first episode?
Absolutely. We're going to show the trailer here in a minute as well, but I want to kind of whet people's appetite before we get there.
Okay. Well, the first episode is focused on the miraculous victory over the Promised Land itself. So, of course, everyone's familiar with Jericho, and the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. So that's a part of the first one. What makes it so exciting is that we actually went there and had some adventures in Jericho filming, and were able to get some drone shots we didn't even think we could get.
Yeah, and some good falafel too. But what I think is so cool about all of this is, as a kid going to Sunday school, you see the felt board Jericho and the felt board Joshua going in, and you've heard these stories since you're a little kid, and when you're actually there and you can see the ruins of Jericho and you start to research and you find out what some archaeologists, I mean, there's still some debate over some things, but the fact that Jericho did exist, it existed at that time, there is a destruction layer that seems, certainly appears to fall in line with the biblical account, all of these things, and you're standing on that spot. I mean, and we're very fortunate. Not everyone can stand on that spot.
Yeah, we are.
And especially, with the situation with the COVID thing now, people not being able to travel, and some of these people, some of our viewers that are watching today, hopefully you'll get a chance to go to Israel and see this stuff for yourself. But if you can't, then this documentary series is a great way for you to explore. You get to meet the archaeologists that are doing these digs. You get to hear from both Jewish and Christian scholars that can talk not only about the historical layer of what's happening, but also the spiritual implications. As these miraculous victories, they weren't just for that moment in time to allow one people to defeat another people. God builds everything with multi layers, with multiple purposes, and those battles, those victories, of course, they helped his people at that time, but they still speak to us today. And so, what is he saying? How does this work? And so that's what I'm just blown away when I see what Laura has come up with, what she's writing, and the research that she's put into this series, and then you presenting and what you bring to the table to present this series. I'm very excited to hear what people think of it once we release these.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about each of the Bible stories is that we are focused on Israel. We are focused on what God did in the past for that nation that He chose. But what we constantly do each episode is we step back and say, okay, this is the God of Israel. That is our God as Christians, and He can do this for them. He can do this. He can win victories in our lives too. So we always come full circle. Every single episode, and there's just such a profound personal application as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, as we were going back and forth on some of the writing, even before we went to film last November, I remember how many conversations we had about this, that really the takeaway from what it is that we were talking about is, there's two. There's one that says, what the Bible is true. We can know that what the Bible talks about happened to a certain degree because of archaeology, because of what the experts are interpreting the archaeology to mean. But also the second thing is that if God is faithful to Israel, and if these stories are true the way that we believe they are, then that means something for us as people who believe in God, who believe in Yeshua, believe in Jesus as the Messiah. And, Chris, you talked about the layers of the message and really what all of this is leading to, every story. We talk about the conquest, Jericho, we talk about Hatzor, and then, we move to David and Goliath. What an amazing story. And we'll chat a bit more about that. And then Hezekiah and Sennacherib and the siege on Jerusalem. All of these stories are leading us to a place, because God had a plan not just to deliver Israel in these moments, but also to establish the house of David, that would be the line of the Messiah, that Jesus would come, that He would die for the sins of the people, that we would be able to be a part of the family as Gentiles. We'd be grafted in. All of this leads us to that eventuality and helps us to understand that God is faithful not just to Israel, but that He's faithful to us personally as well, right? That to me has been sort of the exciting thing about this, is that we're not just going to be educating people, we're going to be helping people to make that jump in their faith journey to trust God because of what it is they're learning in these videos. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's what's been really exciting about some of that. So
the book of Joshua in chapter 6 gives us such a detailed account of how the city was mighty and fortified and yet demolished by Joshua and his people.
He addresses Goliath as an uncircumcised Philistine. Why is this so important? Because he brings up the covenant.
The Philistines are totally shocked. David takes Goliath's sword, decapitates the guy, like holds up his head. The Philistines freak out, they run, and the Jews win an incredible victory.
You know that archaeologists love destructions because, you know, the misfortune of the ancients is our fortune.
We even found an inscription which mentions two names that are very similar to the name Goliath.
The first real miracle was the fact that Israel took out the air force of all of its enemies.
One 1% of the population was killed in the war. That's an enormous number of people.
Why would a loving and just God favor one nation over another, ensure their continued survival, and promise them, and only them, this land? These are the questions I hope to answer as we explore some of Israel's most astounding, miraculous victories. Hey, listen, we will definitely, as a matter of fact, right now, I'll go and put the link in the live presentation if people want to watch it on their own, and we can accomplish something that way.
Yeah, and if they like what they see, they can share that link with their friends. Maybe they know wonders about Israel.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great idea. Great idea. All right, so let's talk while I'm doing this, while I'm looking at my other monitor. You guys can chat a little bit. So first episode, you know, we went with Danny the Digger to Jericho. There was a little bit of excitement because, you know, we couldn't go on our own. We had to book a driver, an Arab driver, to take us into that area. Laura, you had some hesitations about all of that. So talk a little bit through your anxiety there, and we'll go from there.
I always feel safe in Israel, but when you're leaving, what did the sign say as we were heading toward Jericho?
So whenever you go in the West Bank into places like that, there's a big red sign, huge red sign that warns Israeli citizens, do not go in here at your own risk of kidnapping and death, because they've had issues. I mean, Jericho used to be a city that Jews and Arabs both inhabited and lived side by side, and people from Jerusalem would go to Jericho for the day to visit. In fact, Danny the Digger was telling us how when he was a boy, when he would go, I think he lived in the Galilee, and when they would go to visit their family in Jerusalem, there was no outside roads. You'd have to drive through the downtown streets of Jericho to get there. But when with the intifadas and tensions rising, it's become more hostile for Israelis to enter those places, and there's been kidnappings and killings of Israelis that entered.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily see "Welcome to Jericho" as you're driving in. And I started to get a little more nervous as we were driving. That was the most nervous I was on the trip. I think just having kids now, I don't know, I feel a little bit more nervous when we're outside of, but the tour guide seemed, Danny was very relaxed. And we had an Arab driver that he said he trusted with his life. And that made us all very comfortable. And
we had no issues at all.
None.
It was great. And it is a beautiful city, too.
It is, and the food, the hospitality at that. Oh, my goodness, it was amazing.
It was amazing. You know, what I was amazed at is, you know, trying to find a place to film. it's very interesting. Here's some behind the scenes, right? I mean, when you see it on video, it's going to look fantastic. But where we stood and where we filmed was a very unique location, was it not, Chris?
Backyard.
Yeah, someone's backyard at the back end of a big date palm
orchard.
Kind of an orchard. There's like a park there, but that's one thing that you don't get from the video is the smells. And
Yes.
some of the places when we're filming at the edge of fields, because you think about, say, we want to go to Jericho to film. Well, for us to get that, the archaeologist or you speaking at those locations, that means we have to be outside of the location, often in a field or someplace, so that we can show it behind you, right? Otherwise, you're just, you just have a pile of dirt behind you. It doesn't give you any context. Mm-hmm. So getting out into these places put us in some, especially the fields where you didn't always get the best smells. No. And, but you as the viewer, see, that's the benefit. We do that for you so you don't have to smell that. So
yes.
Yeah.
And I will say too that it was great that we had our Arab driver with us, because he was able to negotiate for us at the gate to the actual dig,
yes,
so that we could go in and get some filming there. That was quite a blessing.
It was. So he could speak Arabic well and just connect with them, and then they warmed to us. So yeah, it turned into such a great experience. But initially, I had my hesitations.
Yeah, and I do find that for the most part, when you're in the Middle East, whether it's in Israel or other places, the average person they're usually very, very friendly and very welcoming and very excited to share their culture and their history with visitors. Mm-hmm. We get this impression from the news and all the bad stuff that we hear. We get these false, preconceived notions of what people from the Middle East are like. Mm-hmm. And then you get over there and you think, wow, they're some of the friendliest, most hospitable people, whether they're from Israel or the West Bank or wherever. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of Arab friends in Israel and in the West Bank, and just some of the best people in the world. So it's amazing to see that.
I agree, and there is absolutely nothing like Arab hospitality. Yeah. Arab hospitality is like nothing I have ever seen. When I visit with some of our Arab partners there, the food, oh my goodness, and they keep bringing it and bringing it and bringing it, and it's not good for me personally, physically, around the middle, but it is amazing to be able to be a part of that. And what about the meal that we had at Jericho that day? The chicken dish with the rice and the the pita. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and the hummus. Yeah, what was that drink? They give some sort of a lemon drink.
The mint lemonade kind of.
Yeah. I'm so hungry.
I know.
Lemonade.
Is it close to lunch?
So apparently it's not the camera that adds 10 pounds. It's,
no. Well, yeah. I hear you. Listen, that's great. So we did the Jericho interviews. We didn't just talk to Danny the Digger. We also talked to some pastors, some theologians, some people that kind of helped us walk through the story, and a rabbi too, our good friend Rabbi Ken Spiro. And talk a little bit about some of the people that we encountered.
I think another feature. Well, ever since I've been going to Israel, our tour guides have always said, well, there's no archaeological evidence of a destruction, that matches the Bible, Jericho. So we were going in with that kind of understanding. But I had read some other articles that said there's actually starting to find that there's much more of a possibility than they thought. There are scholars that are contradicting Kathleen Kenyon's original, her theory. So it was neat to go there and kind of figure out what we felt and thought, and hear the archaeologists there. But I would say the highlight for episode 1 for me was talking to the archaeologist that worked at Hazor, because Hazor was just everything. The evidence matches the story in the Bible, pretty much without dispute, or not much of a dispute, I don't think.
And these aren't religious people. These aren't people that want the evidence to support their belief. These are people that are purely scholarly, and they want the science, right? What does the find tell us? And they draw their conclusions from there. And to have somebody like that who doesn't have that, doesn't have that faith agenda to try to prove something, and they end up proving something. I mean, that is the best.
And I mean, maybe for the viewers, that Hazor is not mentioned as much in the Bible, but it is mentioned in the conquest of the Promised Land as the head of all the kingdoms in the area. So it was the head, the big Canaanite, big one.
Yeah.
So like the Washington D.C.
Yeah.
You know what he was saying
right.
At the time. And so to just see that they were able to conquer that, and the evidence really points to Israel, ancient Israel. It really blew me away.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear that, and then to get some of the background from, say, Ken Spiro, and Ken, and also Honorina Heyman from Align with Zion. They bring such understanding to our Western Christian minds, to hear from the Jewish perspective of not only the history but some of the theology. It's not something that changes your faith as a Christian, but it certainly brings much more understanding, which I find is pretty amazing. And I think it's very valuable to have people like Ken and Honorina in a series like this, because they're able to bring so much of the Jewish roots of what we've read, especially, I mean, Old Testament stuff. And I know there's a lot of people that think, oh, I don't even bother reading the Old Testament. It's too boring, or it's too bloody, or whatever. And they think that it's not really relevant for us today. But I would strongly disagree.
Yes.
Yeah. I love what you said about that context, because Judaism, as we understand more about the thinking of the Jewish people over the centuries, it doesn't really challenge Christianity. It actually helps to flesh it out. It helps for us to understand it in a broader perspective, and for us to also be challenged with our narrow Western mindset, because we contextualize everything. We take it all and make it about us, and it's not all about us. It's about God building his family, and we get to be a part of the family eventually down the line. But God is building his family, and so there's this amazing reality that we become aware of as we understand some of those perspectives a little more. And we've had Honorina on the show before, and Ken as well, and it's great to get their perspective, and then also the perspective of some of our friends in Israel who are involved in the Christian and the Messianic world. People like Chad Holland from King of Kings, and man, Chad has a sharp, brilliant mind. The guy thinks on his feet like nobody I think I've ever heard before. And what incredible depth that he brings to the whole story as well. Not just the Jericho story, but throughout the series. Yeah.
It's a very consistent blend, the whole documentary of, you have your scholars, archaeologists, you have your theologians, both Jewish and both Christian, Messianic. There's just a nice blend of voices, and it's just lovely to hear the truth come out through those voices.
Yeah, and to have
absolutely.
all of these people from different backgrounds saying the same thing. Right?
It's amazing.
How often does that happen?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we understand we don't agree on every single fine point, but where those thoughts mesh or merge together and line up, it's incredible to see the sort of the truth that comes out. And I just think people are going to be so challenged by this series, and not just have it underscore or what's the word I'm looking for? Not just have it confirm everything that they've always believed, but have added to their perspective other elements that they didn't even think about, that even more solidly help the truth to be established. I think that's going to be a phenomenal thing.
And I think for first century foundations, I mean, as your name encompasses that idea of Christianity there was a foundation there, that Christianity,
Yeah.
or root system already there before Christianity grew from it. And I just love that there's so many Jewish voices speaking into these traditions and things I never knew about King David, for example. Things like, his background and where he came from. I had no idea it was, he came out of difficult circumstances, and to just have that add into the narrative is so amazing. It just brings your faith so much more alive.
Yeah, the first century foundations had to be built on top of something, not just floating in space. So, the first century foundations of our faith, and that, from the time of Jesus, it's sitting on something, and it's sitting on a bedrock of, thousands of years.
Absolutely.
Of Jewish history.
Meaningful history, yeah.
Yeah. I think that, we talk about, if somebody were to say, well, why would you, as a charity, as a ministry that helps ministries in Israel, want to do a documentary series like this? And my answer would be, well, our mission is that we are here, we exist to turn hearts around the world towards the land, the people, and the God of Israel. That's the stated mission that we have on our website. That's sort of what guides everything that we do. And when I think about turning hearts toward Israel and toward the God of Israel, I think about educating people, about informing them about the fact that the Word of God is true, and that we can challenge, the science behind it and the archaeology behind it to understand that really there's so much that confirms what the Bible tells us. And I believe that as people, fall in love with Israel, for example, if Israel is something that they're excited about, they fall in love with Israel and the archaeology and everything, they're going to fall more in love with God as well, and see God's hand and his faithfulness, not just in their lives, but in the history of the world. And so that's why we do things like this. Of course, we pray too that it will help to fund more ministry that can happen in Israel in the future. We want to be able to continue to help these organizations in the land of Israel with money, with finances. And as we make this product available to people, that they can purchase it, they can download it, they can buy the DVDs if they still use DVD players, and I know lots of people still do. And so, we'll make sure that we have this out there so that people can purchase it. And we're working today on the site, the landing page. I can tell you that it's miraculousvictories.com, Miraculous Victories with an S.com. And you may not find anything if you go there right this second, but something will be up in the next day or so. And we want to just encourage you to check that out. So, a lot of fun putting this together. What I thought was so exciting. I mean, so here's the the geek part. I just love sitting and listening to all of these archaeologists talk about what they do, how they find what they find, and how they are able to authenticate some of these things. I mean, listening to Amnon Bentor, and to Danny the Digger, and to Eilat Mazar. Oh my goodness, she is amazing.
Yes.
Just hearing them talk about the work that they do, and Eilat especially, Dr. Mazar, she's so unassuming. She's just so down to earth, and very, 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 very clear about the work that she does. She's not out to prove anything. But, she says, I work, and she's Jewish, by the way. She's not a Christian believer, but she says, I work with a trowel in one hand and a Bible in the other, because we're looking to see, what it is that we can find here in this land that corroborates the story of our Jewish history. I just think she's incredible.
Yeah, especially considering all of the stuff that's happening in the world today. And there's a lot of people questioning history, questioning our values, questioning where we came from, and to find proof that the book that our Judeo-Christian values and Western life is based on, to find proof that they're not just fables. It wasn't just a group of old fuddy-duddy guys who wanted to make rules to try and control people, or I mean that's the perception. To find out that the book is true, that our values, that our way of life comes from somewhere, and that the history is all valid and real. It's more important than ever for us to find the roots of who we are and where we came from, because they're being challenged. They're being challenged every day, and that's why I think it's very important for everyone who values our Judeo-Christian Western lifestyle and our culture.
Yep.
It's important for you to know where we came from. It's important for you to understand why we have the culture and the values that we have, because you are going to be challenged. And if you can't give an answer, then what good is it? We enjoy so many freedoms. We enjoy such an amazing way of life. And I think it's important for us to understand where that came from.
That's great. That's really, really good. Laura, you have any thoughts on that?
I just agree 100%. I think it's really critical, and especially as the world is going through so much turmoil right now, I think a lot of people are seeking, and they're home and they're alone with their thoughts more, and just wondering, what's the world coming to, and what's the purpose of all of this, and it's just amazing to me to be working on this documentary at this time. I've come away sometimes from writing with tears in my eyes, just going through my own personal hardships right now, and just looking at, for example, King Hezekiah, who, everything looked like Jerusalem was just going to be destroyed. Here you have an army that has destroyed pretty much every other city in Judah, except Jerusalem, and Lachish has just gone down, your biggest, most beautiful, city, and here you are, it's like, and I mean, we were in Lachish, we saw the fortifications, and Chris has some amazing shots, and to think that such a mighty city fell down, and here's Hezekiah, God help me, what do I do? And he just goes into the temple, he goes into God's presence, and he just says, help, and to think that prayer, so simple, just God heard, and he said, Isaiah, go tell him it's going to be okay. And, it's just amazing to see that there's actually archaeological evidence that backs the fact that God answered Hezekiah's prayer, his cry to God. And it just, for me, that was so encouraging for me to just, God, just give him your problems. And I think, Jeff, you ended that episode with, be anxious for nothing. Don't be anxious, but just pray. It's just so simple. And I think just those kind of lessons that are coming out for me are really meaningful.
I love the fact, especially with the Hezekiah story, that not only do you see, of course, what's written in the Bible and the archaeological evidence, but we also have Sennacherib's account.
Yes.
And so you've got this source outside the Bible that, of course, he doesn't tell you why he left Jerusalem. He doesn't tell you, but you can read his own words of how he feels like he's got Hezekiah trapped like a bird in a cage. And he was so impressed with his own victory over Lachish that he had his throne room in Nineveh. He had a massive, what do you call it, mural, or this whole scene laid out that they found a number of years ago. And so you don't just have to take the Bible's word for it. You can look outside the Bible and find the other side of that account, and which just verifies it. I mean, that's.
And of course, as Sennacherib is writing his account, he's going to put himself in the very best possible light. I mean, that's just right. That's how it works when you are writing your memoirs.
That's what I do.
Well, we know that if he had conquered Jerusalem, that it would have been announced very loud and clear. And
exactly.
It was nowhere.
It was the only one not mentioned. He talks about the siege of Jerusalem, but it's the only city he doesn't talk about the conquering of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Phenomenal stuff. I love, I want to go back. You said something, Laura, about Isaiah going to Hezekiah with the message, and the fact that these two were contemporaries of each other. And then we talked to Dr. Alat Mazar, who shared with us how these two bulai were found, one with the name Hezekiah on it, King Hezekiah, one with almost definitively the name of Isaiah the prophet.
10 feet apart, I think it was.
Yeah, 9 or 10 feet apart, 3 meters, I think she. Yeah, social distancing.
It was pretty amazing.
But it is amazing because it comes right out of the same time period of the story, and they find them there below the Temple Mount, and what do you say? It was in the bakery, the garbage area of the bakery. It's just phenomenal to think about all of these things that we discover together. And you know what? I go back to something one of you said earlier. We truly are extremely blessed to be able to travel there, to be able to have done some of the things that we've done, to talk to some of the people that we've talked to. And I just want to say, while we're on the live feed here and on the podcast, Laura, thank you so much for all of the legwork that you did to pull all of this together, because I just became so aware when we were doing this series that I didn't have to make any phone calls. I didn't have to set up any interviews. I didn't have to line up any experts. I didn't have to do any of that. I showed up and went on camera, and all of the credit goes to you for pulling this together as a cohesive, thing. 6 one-hour episodes that we're going to end up with. And somehow you pulled that together in a period of, that we actually did the filming and the interviewing in a period of about 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks, about 11 days, I think, right? And we're still friends afterwards.
I know, we survived.
Right?
Not eating all day, and yeah.
Well, I will say I'm cognizant of the time here, because if I go too far past lunch hour, you guys are going to whine and complain that that you didn't get your lunch again today.
I'm waiting to do that. Actually, that's I've been watching my watch.
You've been watching your watch.
I've been watching, waiting to complain.
So that you can complain. Oh, well, feel free. You have the floor.
Now, if you could just go back to that meal in Galilee.
Oh,
that would.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Here's a little free advertising for Dex in Tiberias. Right? What a phenomenal place, and the food. Oh my goodness. If my friend Doug is watching, he probably too busy today to be watching, but maybe he'll watch us at some point. Doug knows Dex very well, and we actually had to text him a picture of the meal that day so that he could, feel what he was missing. I know he appreciated that very much.
Well, I think we should also mention, though, just that when we do the filming and we do the editing, that's not the biggest part of making this thing. And so all of the research that Laura's had to put in, I mean, it's months of work that when, it's kind of funny when you're dealing with this kind of stuff and the viewer will sit down and watch an hour, they don't realize how many hours went into making that hour, and how many sleepless nights and how many hair pulling out sessions that have taken place to get all of that stuff together. It's a lot of work, but man, it's so cool that we get to do that work.
I feel just blessed to be able to do this. It's such an honor. And
well, and let's let people know too that on the other end, on the editing end, as Laura is trying to pull all this together and go through the different video segments and figure out how it all fits, just for fun, let's throw COVID-19 in there and have your kids home 24/7 and not be able to leave your house and all of that kind of stuff.
I'm telling you, if teachers aren't on strike, there's COVID. It's been one of those years. Starting about January, things have been off the rails at our house. But
yeah. Well, we salute you. You've done some amazing work, and we're really looking forward to seeing the finished product. I really think that we have we've covered a lot of material today, and I don't want to prolong this, but I will just say that, well, first of all, it was a pleasure working with both of you, and continues to be. Today was fun. I'm glad that we could see each other's faces and get to chat again and catch up. But we had a great time as we filmed this. Laura, thanks for keeping track of all my shirts, and because I don't think people understand. I don't think people realize that when you're doing something like this, every place you stop to film could be for a different, episode based on how the interviews and stuff line up. So a lot of quick changes in the car or outside the car or whatever, and you kept track of it all, so that was great. And Chris, you I'll say this about the TV show for sure. For the television show, whenever I would be stuck, you'd always figure out what it is I should say, or give me some kind of idea that could get me rolling. And we can be a little temperamental, us, pastor personality type people.
No.
And so I appreciated, both of you kind of keeping me going and keeping me motivated and encouraging me, telling me that it was good even when it wasn't, and some of that kind of thing. But
that's good. You did a great
you
job.
did a very good job. Yes.
What we finally did get sort of the takes we needed, and I was excited and happy about that. But
very quickly, actually, I was not expecting it to go as smoothly as it did, Jeff. I think God's grace was definitely there, and I just think, you did well.
It's not an easy task to first of all to stand in front of the camera and talk, but then to talk about this kind of stuff. There's a lot of you have to have all that knowledge. You have to have that stuff in your heart and in your brain, and then be able to articulate it. And you did a great job.
Well, thank you. You guys are very, very kind. But it's tremendous for us to be able to be involved in this project together. And I'm getting excited because we're getting close. Let's say by the end of July that we should have 3 episodes ready for people to purchase, and I'm just excited about that. We'll put the trailer up on the website miraculousvictories.com, and that should be ready, as I said, in the next day or so. And we've put the YouTube link into the Facebook Live feed so that anybody who's been watching on Facebook Live can see the trailer from there, or go to our YouTube channel, First Century Foundations. And if you just search First Century Foundations on YouTube, you'll find all of our video stuff there. You can watch 3 seasons of the show. You can see lots of our ministry type stuff, but the trailer is there as well. And it's unlisted at the moment, but after I get off of this call, I'm going to change that because we're sort of going full public today, and we really are excited about this. So 6 episodes. I have them right here so that I don't mess this up. Episode 1, Victory over the Promised Land. We talk about Jericho. We talk about Hatzor and other victories. David and Goliath is episode 2. Man, we didn't even get the chance to talk about going to the Valley of Elah. And
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What a phenomenal place.
Yes.
Yeah. And then episode 3, God Saves Jerusalem. That's Sennacherib and Hezekiah. Then I mentioned episode 4 will be Victory over Sin and Death. And this is the incredible victory that Jesus won for all of us. And I know that that's going to be one that people are looking forward to. Episode 5 is the Resurrected Army. And, this amazing story of the Jewish people since the time of Jesus and the diaspora, and how God has had his hand upon their lives and how he brought them back together as a nation in 1948. There's some great, great stuff in that episode. And then episode 6, Miraculous Peace. And we talk about, among other things in that episode, things like anti-Semitism and God's faithfulness to Israel as we move forward through history. And I just think this is going to be so phenomenal. So we'll kind of bring this all to a bit of a close. But what do you guys want to say before we sign off here today?
I would say that I'm very excited about this series. And I mean, there's so many victories. We just kind of hit a few of them. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to do another series to pick out some more. But
well, you know what? We talked about kind of the first three a little bit.
yeah,
Maybe we'll do this again when we're ready to release the full, the full set,
yeah,
or maybe we'll do one for each of the episodes 4, 5, and 6
yeah,
between now and the fall. I think that would be kind of fun to do.
yeah.
And I'm sort of envisioning we're going to release 3 at once at the
Mhm.
end of July, and then what I'd love to do is release one at a time then until all 6 are
Yeah,
done, and then we'll package it as a set,
yeah.
and it'll be fun. It'll be all kinds of excitement.
That's great. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, I just want to say it's been such a pleasure working with you guys together as a team. Jeff, you've been such I'm so excited and feel so honored to have met you and to be connected with
Oh,
um, you. And Sharon, I know I'll meet her one of these days.
that was her at the door when we were trying to figure out the whole
So
headphones thing.
close.
Yeah.
And of course, Chris, working with you again on this project has been just such a blessing. It has been such an adventure once again, lots of fun. There's always the hard parts of getting everything rolling and jet lag and all that, but it's just you can just feel that God's hand's been on this project, and so I'm very excited for its
Release.
full release
Yeah.
coming soon.
Well, thank you. Those are very kind words, and I just want to reiterate, the Laura, especially the work that you've done. I remember this was the first time you've been away from your kids in that long,
Yeah,
as well, right? This is kind of
yeah,
your first foray back out into travel for work and all that kind of thing after having your children. And so, thanks for doing that with us. And we managed somehow. You connected by FaceTime and stayed connected that way. And we all figure it out when we're away from our loved ones. But Chris, I know that when you go home, your family is like, oh, you're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah. Well, now this is the longest that I've been home since my
yeah.
kids were now 19 and 15 were born, and so yeah, they haven't chased me out yet. So we're getting along pretty good here.
They're not dropping hints about you traveling somewhere soon, or
No, no. In fact,
no?
quite the opposite. We've had a lot of family game nights and stuff. It's been difficult for work, but it's been
Sounds
very, very good for the family. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Sounds fun.
and what's
Uh,
amazing is we've got this amazing footage that's
yeah,
so fresh, and it's just like just in time,
yeah,
yeah.
Um,
So as we sort of wrap up, that's what I wanted to say. I think it's incredible. None of us knew. None of us knew in November, as we were putting all of this together, that COVID was going to happen. We had no idea that this was on the horizon. And here, in a moment where people are going through so much in their lives and their families with loss of jobs, and I mean, you talk about battles. You talk about being desperate and about feeling discouraged. I think that this is a timely message for people, that God, in the midst of our incredible challenges, will help us to come through victorious. I I didn't know, Laura, you didn't know when you were writing some of this stuff that this would be the time or the environment that this message would come out in. But I just think it's going to be an encouragement to so many people who are fighting with anxiety, who are having mental health issues, who are just going through it because of isolation and fear. People are afraid. What does this virus mean? Look at Israel right now. Israel is now moving into a second wave in a very, very serious situation, with more people getting on ventilators, more cases per day than we're seeing in Ontario right now, and we have about 5 million more people here in our province than they do in Israel. So it's the timing, to me, is uncanny. It's almost as though, God might have had something to do with this, not with COVID, but with this encouraging message for people to know that when things are beyond hope, that God can still, be faithful to us and help us to come through victorious. I think that's amazing.
It is amazing. It is a
Yeah.
time-saved message. For such a time as this, it feels right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Amen. Well, listen, guys, thanks for coming on today. Chris, I know you need to go and get your lunch.
Yeah.
And
Come on, let's wrap this
pleasure.
up.
yeah. Say hi to your families for me, and thanks for joining us. If you're watching, listening on the live event or on the podcast today, thank you for joining us. And we want to just remind you, this is going to be available soon. By the end of July is our target date for the first 3 episodes to be available, and you can find out more at miraculousvictories.com. miraculousvictories.com. And so we're going to say goodbye. Thanks for being with us, and check out Miraculous Victories of Israel.
Okay, shalom.
Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I just want to reiterate, we would love it if you would check out our Miraculous Victories of Israel documentary series. It's going to be available end of July, 1st of August, and miraculousvictories.com is the website. Remember, we do support many ministries in the land of Israel. If you would like to help us by donating to assist those ministries, we would appreciate that so very much. Our website is firstcenturyfoundations.com. That is firstcenturyfoundations.com, and /donate will take you right to our donate page. And it would be just such a wonderful thing if you would help us in that way. Thanks for listening in today. And remember, as Christians, we stand with Israel.